Hello, everyone. Today I wanted to talk about a 1931 film that was directed by Frank Borzage, and this is called Bad Girl. Bad Girl was a film that won Borzage his second Oscar for Best Director. He was the first winner of the Best Director Oscar for a previous film, and this also won, I think, a Best Adapted Screenplay Oscar for 1931. It's a pre-code movie, but if the title "Bad Girl" sounds like a pre-code movie, but the girl in this movie is not in any way, shape, or form a bad girl. She's actually a very good girl. It originated as a stage play, or as a novel rather, and then became a hit stage play in New York and passed through a bunch of studios. Even though it was pre-code, I guess they thought because of the title and perhaps the play and the novel were much more scandalous, kind of overtly sexual material that you sometimes associate with pre-code, they passed on it. Went to Fox, where Borzage had a long-term contract, and Borzage was he was not quite persona non grata, but he had two flops in a row, especially a big budget flop with Lillian, which he got a lot of studio interference. They were kind of, the Fox studio heads had planned to really terminate Borzage's contract, but they owned this property. They had a screenplay, and they were busy with other things. And they gave Borzage a low budget, cost less than $100,000. He was pretty much on his own. Didn't have any real studio interference with this film. And it's the story. It's a typical Borzage story, and then it's about a couple that struggles. They face adversity. They fall in love. They face adversity. Oftentimes in Borzage, or at least I've not seen that many of his films, but like in the recent Criterion Collection release, History is Made at Night, the two lovers in that film, played by Jean Arthur and Charles Boyer, have all kinds of adversities from the outside that are preventing them to fulfill their destiny. And in Borzage movies, love is an exalted relationship, and you have to go through these struggles in order to achieve a kind of maturity or enlightenment. But in Bad Girl, it's really interior kind of obstacles that this couple has to face. The heroine is played by Sally Eilers. She's a New York City model. She's discussed it with men. All the men that she comes in contact, all they're interested in is that one thing, and they all want to flirt with her. They don't, and for that one thing. She meets up with a man on a boat coming back from Coney Island. Seems to be an angry young man. Sally Eiler's girlfriend says, "Here's a guy that won't flirt with you," and so she's immediately intrigued. They have a bet, and she loses the bet because he does not flirt with her. Instead, he's sort of antagonistic to her. But she's quite taken aback by that he's somebody different. And we quickly go to a tenement staircase, and there's a few scenes set in tenement staircases. And we see that this evening that they've spent together, they've sort of they felt a rather magical attraction, and they're both trying to sort of pull away from it. And two people can't be happy. They hear all these arguments going on in the tenement building, people coming up and down, yelled at by wives, husbands. Nobody seems happy. Sally Eiler's character, she'd been raised by an older brother. Her mom died in childbirth. This older brother is kind of abusive and overbearing towards her. And James Dunn came out of poverty, His mother was a washerwoman. There was no way he's going to end up in a tenement. His mother died before she could ever have any kind of material happiness. But for some reason they click, they get married, she gets pregnant. Both of them think that the other doesn't really want to have a child. There's some misunderstandings. Of course, not only do they have these interior struggles, but this is the depression, so that money is always on the mind, jobs, how are we going to make enough money to do things? And there's also the best friend that Sally Eilers has, and she's played by Mina Gombell, or Gombell, I guess it is, Gombell. She was familiar, and she went on to play a lot more, many more supporting roles. And she's in friendship is another aspect in Borzage's movies that's really exalted, and she's about as good a friend as you can have. She's almost like her sponsor in life, her protector. She's older, is a widow, has a 7-year-old son, and she's always there. And she also is able to see behind James Dunn's gruff outward demeanor that there's somebody really good there. I think she at one point says, "You're not nearly as hard-boiled as you appear to be." And they too, you can see there's a friendship, or at least a deep respect between the two. A husband that actually cares about a man who actually cares about his wife, and a friend who really cares about her best friend. And so the movie, low budget, the studio didn't think much of it, released, became a sensation. It got great reviews, audiences loved it, made over $1 million, which was quite a lot in those days for a movie, especially for a movie that didn't even cost $100,000 in its budget. James Dunn and Sally Eilers became instantaneously popular. They made 2 more movies together without Borzage. But their careers didn't really materialize in a way you would have thought from this movie. Eilers had been in the movies with Max Sennett when she was a little girl, had been in Buster Keaton movies, and she was in some pretty good movies, but she never really became the star you would have thought she might have gotten, because she's really good in Bad Girl. And this was James Dunn's first movie. He's probably most famous nowadays for having played the father in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, Elia Kazan's first film, which he plays a alcoholic father. And Dunn was pushed by the Fox office in New York because Dunn had become a pretty big star in vaudeville. He had a great singing voice. He sings in Tree Grows in Brooklyn. He does not sing in Bad Girl. He had a great tenor voice, and he did get to appear in some more starring roles, but then they sort of dried up in the late 30s, and he himself became an alcoholic. Went on to make still had a busy career, even though it was uneventful, and also in television before he died. So for Borzage, it was a very, very important movie because it reestablished himself. He had been a big-time director in the days of silent film, and are you going to make the transition to sound? Many directors had a great deal of trouble with that. There's a commentary by Ken Jones, who's quite a famous film critic. He was the head of the New York Film Festival. I was disappointed in it. It didn't seem like he prepared much for it, and there's a lot of dead time. He's very hesitant in getting out the information that he has, a lot of ums and errs, and but he knows Borzage movies. There's no doubt of that. I mean, and he comes up with a lot of good information when he becomes forthcoming. Again, when I listen to commentaries, I usually watch the movie and in this case and in so many cases, you get to understand the visual style of the director, the way he blocks out scenes. He loves triangle. He loves these three characters. He loves to put them in triangular compositions, cinematography, the set design, the costumes. You get to notice all these things, and Borzage gave a lot of attention to all this type of detail. And the next film, and I bought 5. I read this. I did a video. It's a couple videos back, I think. Is a great book by Hervé Dumont on the life and films of Frank Borzage. And I bought 5 Blu-rays of Borzage, all from the 1930s. 1930s is kind of fun for me now because I'm not real familiar. I'm familiar with most of the comedies, but not really the dramatic movies. His next film that I'm going to talk about, watch in a few days, is Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms, a very controversial adaptation that Ernest Hemingway couldn't stand. Thought it was overly sentimentalized, especially the end. But Borzage himself, in interviews, regards it as one of his best movies, one that he's the most proud of. So I'm really looking forward to A Farewell to Arms coming up next. So that'll about wrap this video up. Thanks for everybody who stuck with me to the end. As always, comments would be welcome. Other than that, take care. Catch you next time.